Welcome, everybody, to another Wednesday night edition here on the Rock Pile. Make sure to tune in every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, where I talk to small business owners, entrepreneurs, coaches, and athletes, and many more. Tonight's a special guest. Not only is he a RFA alum, he's also a former RFA basketball, former RFA football. He's the current head football coach at Lake Forest College, friend of mine, and I am happy to have him on here tonight. I'm glad he made the time to come on. It means a lot to me. If you have any questions for Coach Catanzaro, please make sure you put them in the comment box. If you're watching on YouTube, just make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you click the bell for all, and you can catch all the former shows of mine anytime I go live. So without further ado, let's bring Coach Catanzaro into the program now. He'll be on here in a second. There's Coach. How are you, Coach?
Good, Rock. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Good to have you on here. I'm excited to I'm glad you made the time for me tonight.
I appreciate it, man. We're family, so you know it's good.
Well, I was telling you before we came on, you still look like you can play.
Yeah, different position nowadays, or maybe the same position, just a little bit bigger body. I don't know. So definitely don't have the speed I once had, but I got a little bit more knowledge, so maybe that'll make up for it.
No, I hear it. And listen, man, you've done a lot since high school and since being at RFA. So I want to kind of start a little bit with the high school career. For many of the listeners and viewers tonight, the local here all know who you are. But talk to us a little bit about your career when you were in high school.
Yeah, man. I mean, where was a better place to grow up in the 90s than Rome, New York, and play for some of the legendary coaches? I grew up about 2 blocks from Rome Free Academy High School, the old high school. And so in the summers, it was, being in Coach Evans's basketball camp in the morning there, and then getting into the weight room with Coach Mize in the afternoon. And then as you got into high school, you got to actually work for those guys and get paid to be there instead of having to pay to be there. And that was kind of my life, man. There between all the neighborhood parks, whether it was Franklin Field or Geyer, that's what we did all summer and just played every sport. And then when you got into coaching or getting into play for the organized ball, Rome just had a great number of coaches. Whether it was Mike Warwick, who was kind of the feeder program at Stroud, bringing everybody up, and Coach DeCoste and Coach Ferrucci at the freshman level. And you got great basketball coaches, and those were kind of my 2 sports, were football and basketball. And I think that both Coach Evans and Coach Baldwin will tell you I was more of a football player on the basketball court than I was a basketball finesse player or anything like that. But I was lucky, man. Had great coaches that made me fall in love with the game for the right reasons. And it was never to get your name in the paper, and it was never to do anything like that, but it was to just win and have fun and be part of a team and a family environment within the locker room that was better than, what some guys had at their own house. I was fortunate. I had a great house, but there were guys on our team that, their best family environment was there in that locker room with, Coach Mize or Coach Hope coming to grab them by the ear and lift them up and make them feel better about life. And that thing never left me. And, so RFA was a ton of fun for me. I'm one of those guys that still thinks fondly back on it of like, the guy, when I had my wedding, 3 of my high school teammates were up there, as best men, and I got married late. I was almost 30 when I got married. So those guys were still super close to me, and it was special, man. So,
I always tell people, and even my wife, when my wife moved here with me from Ohio, she's from Oregon. She didn't really know how big, sports were in this area. And a buddy of mine that does the radio show with me, Pete Pagliaro, was completely in awe of the coaches that, we were fortunate enough. You and I were fortunate enough to grow up with, and not saying it's not like that now, but we were just so blessed in Rome to have not just great coaches, but great coaches at the youth levels that a lot of the programs don't have. And that says a lot. That's special.
Absolutely. And I think both you and I got coached by our dads in the youth level too. That didn't hurt us at all. We got coached at home as much as we got coached in practice. But no, those feeder programs and the way that everything was the same. Rome was ahead of their time in the way that, I remember now 42 rip in 7th grade was still 42 rip at high school level. That it never changed. And we were there at a time, in what's probably the most different at Rome with the coaches is, Coach Evans had been there for 30 years. Coach Bruce as the defensive coordinator and had been a head coach there, and Coach Hope. Those guys were there for 30 plus years together. And that consistency, even at the junior high levels, was there as well. And you just had that, you could tell that those guys were as committed to each other, and there wasn't egos getting in the way of anything. And, you had guys who dads had played for those guys at some
Yeah.
point. The legend of those guys and the impact was just, I don't know. There's no way to put into words how much of an impact some of those coaches had on generations of Romans, not just, certain guys.
And I caught a piece of that when I took over as the head coach at Sequoia my first year. I'll never forget it. When you get up in front of the team, you talk about winning, you talk about family, you talk about tradition. A lot of the schools in this area they weren't blessed, they weren't fortunate enough. Friday nights was it. Friday nights in Rome, the town shut down. I mean, I keep telling people the crowds that we had, I'll never forget it. The Henninger game that we had, it was standing room only. You couldn't get a seat inside the stadium unless you got there at 4:00, like my grandparents would get there at 4:30, 5:00. The stadium was packed. We played in front of thousands at RFA.
Rock, I've been at the collegiate level for, I don't know, 20 years now as a coach at the Division II and Division III level. And I've yet, even at Eastern Kentucky University, when we went there for a money game, have not played in a crowd like what we played in front of in Rome on Friday nights. And it's, that's the part that I think that is, it's hard to sell to kids and explain to them. But I mean, it was truly different and special when we played there. So there's a lot of high schools, that would love to have had, or still would love to have, what we had during the 90s there.
You know what I think is tough too, and I've shared this with my dad. I think because my dad still coached after I graduated at a couple different high schools, smaller high schools, and then he helped me out. And I always say that, the game of football is the game of football. Nowadays, when you and I played, it was let's get in the I formation, and it was 42, 43 rip. Once in a while, I'd run it option, and, we'd run it. We probably threw the ball maybe 8 or 9 times because we didn't have to. Yep. When you look at the high school game now, we'll get into the college game, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. Now you got the spread offense. You got so many different styles that years ago, do you think that we could have still had the success we had if we would have ran what they run in today's game with the players and athletes we had?
I'll tell you what, I think that offensively we would have had the athletes to do it. Now, It would have had to change how we prepared and things like that, but we built our whole program at RFA on running the football. When you think of the linemen that we had come through there, the Vinny Cards, the Jim Hop, you had tight ends like Kirk Wild, who were 6'4", 200 and whatever pounds and freakishly athletic. You had, Myslinski's coming through there. Our program was built on running the football. And at that time, we were so darn good at it that why would you do all the other stuff? And now everybody knows how to run the spread. Like throwing the football has become the norm. But when you're in warmer weather climates like you see, it's a lot easier to get those quarterbacks and receivers developed because you can do 7-on-7 year round. We still allowed our guys to play multiple sports. And what you're seeing now is the sports specialization is making the passing game better because it is something you can do year round rather than, playing football the way we did where you're running, like you said, a little bit of option, a little bit of power football. You can't do that year round. That's not allowed. You don't have pads on to develop that. So if you can steal some quick points in the passing game and run all these 7-on-7 tournaments and, skirt the rules a little bit, I think that's the only reason why people are doing that more.
How about coaches wise? You think, Coach Bruce and Coach Hoke and Coach Mize, Coach Ryan, those guys were ahead of the game. They were ahead of the other coaches. We won games in warmups. Teams never want to play us. I always say all the time here, I never lost a game on that field. From a ninth grader on varsity all the way through, I never lost a home football game. But do you think, like the Coach Hokes now, the Coach Bruces, do you think they could have adapted to the game now, the kids now, the parents, how crazy they are now? You think they could have adapted?
No doubt. They would have continued to adapt, and they would have always stayed ahead of the game. They were ahead at their time, and they would have had the decisiveness and the foresight to keep being ahead of the time. And it may not have been going to, a 4-wide spread attack. They might have said, you know what, we're going to actually invest deeper into the triple option like the military academies do.
Yep.
And say, this is who we are. And, when Paul Johnson went to Georgia Tech, he showed that you could run the triple option in the ACC and win a lot of football games with maybe some lesser speed and talent kids. Even when we were there, one of the teams that was most innovative was Henninger. I don't know if you remember your sophomore year, but they start running single wing, but everybody now would call that the Wildcat to Marquise Walker, where they would just direct snap to him and say, you're short a hat in the box because you got to cover everybody else. Go find a way to tackle him. And, I mean, it was single wing football reinvented as the Wildcat. And, again, I think Hoke, Mize, all those guys, they were so far ahead of their curve then that they would have just continued to be that gap. Whatever that gap was, they would have kept that.
And I want to say that Henninger game, I want to say it was my sophomore year. I think we were losing at halftime. And which I think was one of the only games, if I remember, in the 4 years that I played, we were ever down at halftime.
I'm talking about the one at the Dome. This is the one at the Carrier Dome.
Oh, you're talking about that one. I'm talking the one at home.
Yeah, no, this is the one at the Carrier Dome because I think I missed. You were a freshman when I was a senior, I think, or maybe a sophomore. So the one in the Carrier Dome, they started going direct snap to Walker because they weren't able to run their normal offense against us and get what they needed. And they used that was their innovation and wrinkle. But again, I think that Coach Bruce makes a quick adjustment on the side and puts us into I think we called it the night defense back then.
Yeah.
And it was a guy like a 5'3" with a spy in the middle and just said, that guy goes, you go. And all of a sudden that wasn't working anymore for him.
What were some of your most memorable football moments that you remember?
Gosh, selfishly, so I got to go personal selfish, the first two. And I know that if Nick Rizzo tunes in, he'll be laughing, or Kelly Hoke will laugh about this one. As a junior, I was the backup center. I was playing more in defense, but I was the backup center, and our starting center, Jim Donovan, got hurt in practice before we played. I think it was Whitesboro or CNS. It was one of those two guys in the Carrier Dome. And we had to win the game to get to the Carrier Dome.
Yeah, we played CNS in the Dome.
Yeah, so whoever had to play the week before the Dome, Jim gets hurt in practice, and all of a sudden I've got to go and be the starting center. I'm about as nervous as can be. And again, at that time, I'm about 175 pounds, playing with two Division I offensive linemen at the tackle spots, and Jamie Harper and Vinny Card. And then you've got a couple of really good guards, and young guys didn't play back then a whole lot. And so I'm playing, and I remember in the pregame, I got my old Walkman on with a cassette single that had like Eye of the Tiger on one side and Welcome to the Jungle on the other side, and it didn't flip on its own. So you literally had to take the tape out and put it in. And I remember Kelly Hoke picking on me, calling me flip for like 5 days because all I had done was flip the tape over and over, and she was just listening to the tape flip. So that's one of them. Playing in the Carrier Dome was a definitely a cool experience. We did that quite a bit. I had a 68-yard fumble return for a touchdown against Central Square. They got called back because there was like a personal foul on one of our guys, and I remember never being more exhausted than that. And then the really funny one, I'll give you a funny one, was I think it was my junior year of basketball. Coach Baldwin probably still shakes his head at this one. Is we're playing somewhere, I don't know if it's Baldwinsville or somewhere far away, and I'm like, these rims are low. They're definitely low, Coach. There's no doubt that these rims aren't 10 foot. And he's just looking at me like I'm nuts. He's like, look, you don't even play a lot. You don't need to worry about it. Well, watch this. And I run down and I jump up and I hang on the rim. And I get a technical foul before the game from the officials because they thought I dunked the ball. And you weren't allowed to do that back then. So I get a tech before the game. And I'm like, I told you, I can't touch the rim. And that was my big funny moment, I guess, with him. So a little bit of humbling.
I'll never forget my ninth grade year. I'll never forget the night before, it was equipment handouts. My dad was a JV coach, and my dad and I are going through like signals. My dad's going through, signals for offense because I was going to play JVs. And I'll never forget, I slept in and I get a phone call, and it was Coach Hoke. I was talking to my dad, and he says, put your son on the phone. I get on the phone. He goes, where are you? I said, Coach, I'm sleeping. I don't have to be there until 1, 2 o'clock. He goes, get your butt down here. Now you got to get equipment. You're coming on varsity. And I'll never forget my first day I walked onto the field with everybody. And then, like you said, you're talking Jamie Harper, Vinny Card, Tommy Haddad, all these big guys. And I'm like, here I am, 140, 150 pounds. I was scared shitless out of my mind. And but I'll tell you what, it was such a good group of guys. And Kat, you're one of the only ones that I will say this. You took me under your wing as an older guy that I looked up to. That here's this little skinny ninth grader on varsity, not knowing if I'm going to play. And you kind of took me under your wing the entire time because I was the second string quarterback and you were the second string center. I
Yep.
played I played free safety my first few years. But it was awesome, just a group of guys. But one of the things, let's go to the basketball piece, and we'll come back, and then I want to get into the college piece with you. I always tell people we weren't the greatest basketball. We didn't have the 6'6", the 6'7" kids. You were 6 foot, if that. You were our starting center. But I'll tell you, I think we had more fun playing basketball and all that than we did football. And we had a lot of good times football. We had some good times hoop-wise.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I always laugh about is I got to play on a really good basketball team. My junior year, we had, Rondell Williams and Brad Nelson. Yep. Larry McCray was the guy that kind of did for me in basketball what, you just said I did for you in football. He took me under his wings. He had gotten hurt and was really helping me try to figure out basketball because, to be honest with you, I was not a good basketball player. And I was I was an athlete that tried hard, and I was 5 good fouls and a couple of rebounds. And that was my specialty. And, but you're right. I mean, being on the bus, and I always laughed about the basketball bus versus the football bus. Like it's two different sports, and the mentality on the buses, going to games and coming back from games, totally different environment. Like you're on a football bus and you're going to a game, it's like silent. There's no talking, there's no laughing, you are ingrained to just focus as hard as you can. And then in basketball, somebody's telling jokes. You got cheerleaders on the same bus. There's all kinds of stuff that's like, it's a totally different environment. But you're right. We weren't very good in basketball, but we did have fun. And, there were certain refs that I knew what I could get away with. And, could I set a good pick here for you or not a good pick? And it was basketball. Again, we weren't super talented, but we did have fun. And I'll tell you what, it's probably, Coach Baldwin's influence for me is one that can never be understated because he took me to a basketball camp right before my senior year of high school up at Camp of the Woods in Speculator, New York. And it's where I heard about Greenville College for the first time, which is where I ended up going to school. I ended up going 15 hours away from Rome to go to school because I heard about this college at this basketball camp. And the people that told me about it, just once I visited, I knew it was the right spot. And what that has done for my life since then, I could have went to Cortland or Ithaca or, any of the traditional Rome haunts where the football players went. And I got such a different experience. And, that camp, it was one of the more transformational camps I've ever been to as part of the FCA group. And it was really, really important. So.
And Coach Baldwin had it tough too. Coach Baldwin had to come in and replace, Coach Evans, which, it's always so hard to replace a legendary coach that's been here for so long. And listen, times were different when Coach Baldwin came in. I do remember that year though, because I think I was a freshman or 10th grader, and I think I got pulled up for the sectional game. Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned Larry, Brad Nelson, and that was a good group. That was a really good group. Yeah, but Coach Baldwin had it tough.
That was the last winning team for a long time.
Yeah,
because we screwed it up the next year, and I think we had one win my senior year in basketball. So we went from being in the sectional game to one win. And but I'll tell you what, man, we still had a lot of fun. To this day, basketball was fun. It was all, and even when I got to play in college, it was definitely for fun.
And we got Coach Vaccaro says, good to listen to days gone by and hear names of the past makes me feel proud that I was there. And Coach Vaccaro played a huge role there, Coach. Yeah. Good to hear from you. Coach Medicis, I knew he was going to throw this. He's my running partner on Saturday mornings. Don't forget, Coach Catanzaro called that Cincy was better than Michigan a couple weeks ago. Coach Medicis, don't get me started, man. Come on. But, yeah, you were right, Coach. Coach, what was before we get into the college piece? I know most of the coaches you just mentioned obviously played a huge part for you, but when you look back on the high school career that you had and the friends and the relationships, any regrets from your high school time? Could you have done anything different?
No regrets, man. I was lucky and blessed to live where I lived, and I look at the guys who were in the neighborhood, whether it was. There were guys in the neighborhood that didn't even play football and basketball that we were always around. There was, Kevin Colmy was a baseball player and a wrestler that lived right down the street, and we would play tag, and we'd go to the front yard of the New York State School for the Deaf, and it was true tackle football without pads on. And those were the guys in that neighborhood. Todd Schober, who was a wrestler and a football player, was a guy that helped me get into wrestling and stuff like that early on. That made me a better football player. there's nothing I would have changed about that experience. So, I mean, I'm not saying I want to go back and be a high school kid, again, but it was pretty darn good, man. I got no regrets.
So now here you are, you're the head coach at Lake Forest College, and a lot of people say, you have an idea when you want to coach at a young age, that you want to coach athletes, and it's not the easiest thing to do. I think it's one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing to do. When did you have an idea that you wanted to get into coaching?
I was gonna go and be a high school coach and teacher. It's what I went to school for. I went to be a phys ed major. That was what I decided I wanted to do. I actually went as a business major and took like one stats class and was like, nah, I'm good. I don't need to do this anymore. So so I switched over to the education route, but then I did my student teaching and realized that I really didn't like being in the classroom every day. And I don't know if it was the subject matter I was teaching or what, but it wasn't my thing. It wasn't what I remembered high school education being like. And so I ended up getting out my senior year, college basketball season's ending. And I've had a talk with, my dad and everybody else. What am I going to do? Because I don't know that I want to be a teacher anymore. And my college defensive coordinator offered me the chance to go be a graduate assistant and get my master's degree paid for. And it was going to be in human resources communication. Like I was going to go be a human HR director somewhere, do something like that, get out of it. And I fell in love with being a college coach. And so really it wasn't until I was at Glenville State, being a graduate assistant that it kind of confirmed up for me that that's what I was going to do.
And then, so you spent 3 years there, and then you spent 3 years at Wingate?
Yeah, 3 years at Wingate, and then out here to Lake Forest to be the defensive coordinator. Did that for 3 years, and then have been the head coach for the last, I guess we'll call it 10 in a COVID year, whatever that equals. Or 11 in a COVID year. So
I had to look through, but you got some impressive numbers here. I'm not going to go through everything, but 2012 league title, 3 years as the defensive coordinator, 2-time Liberty Mutual Coach of the Year finalist. You coached 7 All-Americans. You're the current assistant director of athletics, second in program history and wins, 97 all-academic honorees in the last 4 years. That's a lot of work put in. And I got to ask you this. Have you had the opportunities to go elsewhere?
Yeah, there's been several opportunities. If you have success, you get courted a little bit. And there have been a couple of opportunities through the years that have popped up, whether it was to go join somebody's staff at a higher level as a position coach or a coordinator, or even a couple of head coaching jobs that popped up where, people asked me to interview for it and that kind of thing. I mean, even at the Division III level, there's still search firms and all that kind of stuff. And so you hear from them from time to time if you fit the criteria that the school wants. And, some of my exposure that I've received by being on the national committee and on the AFCA board of trustees definitely probably helps me even more than anything I did on the field. But it's, there have been some opportunities, but there's no interest for me to really leave Lake Forest. I mean, they always tell you when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into the soil, you want to see the crops grow. And we've still got more here to accomplish. We haven't reached our goals yet. So I haven't reached my goals as a coach. That's for sure.
And we talk about it a lot on Saturday mornings, but, a coach that I played for, Dave Clausen, who's the head coach at Wake Forest, has been all over the place. And, I always say that a lot of these coaches want to go from like a MAC school or take Wake Forest, and maybe they jump to like an SEC school, a bigger program, which it's more money. And sometimes it's okay to be comfortable in a position where you're at, that it's not always about the money. It's being about the right fit. Is that really when you look at Lake Forest? Because you guys really in the past, you guys have had your ups and downs. It wasn't always, 8-3, 9-2, 10-2 seasons. But is it sometimes more about the fit for the coach?
It's the fit, not just for the coach, but maybe for the family too sometimes. And what you see at the Division I levels, a lot of their wives don't work, or they get really involved in community service or charities. My wife's a 2-time state championship field hockey coach, is had a lacrosse team that's won a couple of sectional titles. And to be honest with you, as geographically, there's not a lot of places where there's field hockey.
Yeah.
And for her to have that opportunity to keep coaching and have her career too is really good. But the other thing that contributes for us is, our daughter Katie is a special needs child, and so she has a super support staff here and support group in the Lake Forest area. And for us, that's probably the number one deciding factor on anything we do moving forward. So to me, it's really it is the right fit for us as a family. In the career part's the easy thing because I still get to coach ball. It's no different on Saturdays. It's still 120 yards by 53 and a third. You got to have 11 guys do something in concert to go be successful. So for me, there's no reason to go to a bigger stage when I've got the biggest stage in the world every Saturday at 1 o'clock.
You know, when you see a lot of pressure on a lot of these new college coaches nowadays, you see them for a couple years, 3 years. If you don't win right out of the gate, you know, you don't see those coaches are getting fired. New staffs come in. How much pressure is there at the Division III level where you're at? Is it any different?
There's still pressure, but I think the pressure has a little bit more grace than maybe you would get at the Division I level because there's a little bit less eyes. You know, if we go 4-6, I'm still meeting with the athletic director to talk about what are we going to do to fix it, you know, before next year and make sure that we don't repeat it. Now, do we have to go win a national championship? No, that's not. The school kind of sets its own goals, and I think at the Division III level, you know, every school sets their own goals of what they want to be. Do they want to be, you know, 5-5 and great, you know, win the conference? Do they want to be competitive in the conference? Do they want to be a national championship level team? I think that each college makes that decision based on what do they want to invest into their programs? What do they want to see every kid that goes through it in 4 years? What is the takeaway that kid has from their football experience, their sport experience? And that's how they define success. It's not just the wins and losses or the top 25 rankings, things like that.
You don't see many defensive coordinators as head coaches.
That's a mistake.
I agree with you 100%. What were some of the early challenges for you when you went from being a defensive coordinator to the head coach?
Getting the offensive guys to know that I was their head coach, that I wasn't just the defensive coordinator who now decided when timeouts were being made, you know, that I was trying to change the program. And personality-wise, defensive coaches tend to be a little bit more fired up and, you know, maybe a little bit more yellers and screamers, and offensive guys aren't always used to that. And so I think that was kind of one of the things I had to kind of get a coach on my staff to handle the fiery emotional piece for the defensive guys so that it didn't seem like I was talking to just the defense and having the offensive guys tune me out. So, but it probably took me, I tell everybody, I learned more in my first 18 months of being a head coach than I did in 7 years of being an assistant coach. I really learned all the things I didn't know that went on behind the scenes and the administrative stuff and dealing with fundraising and alumni, not just being the guy sitting in the basement trying to, you know, draw up defensive ways to stop people. You know, I took a lot for that. So those are probably the biggest things for me, to be honest with you.
Now, how about putting a staff together? What goes into assembling a staff?
Balance. You got to find balance in your staff. I think that you have to have guys that you trust so that, like, I don't look at our offensive game plan other than when the offensive coordinator brings it to me. I'm not micromanaging him saying, no, I don't like this play or this play. It's okay, tell me why you like this. Okay, I can live with that. That's your reason. If your gut feels good, you've watched more of their defensive film than I have, I'm going to trust you to make those calls. But you got to find guys that can balance you in recruiting. You got to find guys that can balance you, you know, schematically or reaching your players and just filling all the different roles within the program that you're going to have. And I still to this day say the most important thing, and you hear this from, you know, Urban Meyer and some other people, the single most important person in our program is the strength coach, because he's the guy that's with the players in the offseason while the coaches are going recruiting and doing that stuff. He's the day-to-day face. And so you got to have the right guy that not only is the right personality and is holding them the same standards that you as a head coach want, but is developing them as in their strength and speed the way your program needs them to. It isn't just kind of caught into one thing that they're going to do. And that we've been very fortunate that way.
Now, how about recruiting? You mentioned recruiting. I know that's obviously a huge part of coaching in college football, and a lot of schools are able to get different types of recruits. What type of kid do you look for?
So they got to be talented football players, but we look for guys. There's really three models of guys that fit us really well. There is the overachiever, the guy that, you know, I hate to say it, but he looks like me in high school. He's 40 pounds too light for the position he's playing, but he works hard and makes plays. And you're going to probably move that guy to a new position just like I did. And can you forecast that guy to have success at a different position other than where they're at? The second kind of guy is the guy who maybe didn't get to start until his senior year. You know, is behind a couple of talented players, so he's a little bit under recruited. You know, the Division I's and 2 schools don't know about him because he doesn't have game film yet. And you get in on him early because you're again trying to forecast that he's going to be a pretty good football player. And then the third thing is the kid who wants something that we have, that we provide better than others, whether they're really into their finance major and they appreciate the internships that we have in Chicago, or, do they have a hook of, this kid's from Arizona, but his grandparents live 15 miles from our campus. Does that fit us better than, a local kid that just wants to go to a Big Ten school and we got to convince them otherwise? And, it's finding the guys who can appreciate the small college environment, and that what we have is, though there are other small colleges, what we have is still unique.
Now, how about for New York State? Have you recruited any of our players this way?
Yeah, we have. Actually, the guy who's an assistant outside linebacker coach for the University of Buffalo is one of our former wide receivers from Kenmore Easton, just outside Buffalo. He came to play for us. We've got some Massachusetts kids right now, but no New York kids on the team. We are recruiting a guy from the 315. Actually, he's from down in Hamilton, New York, and so we if we can lock him up, that'll give us another one. And we do have a tight end from not Sherburne. God, he's going to kill me. But one of our tight ends is another 315 guy who's playing for us. So we did get a couple of guys, but yeah, we definitely recruit that way. We recruit nationally. You look at our roster, we're 30 miles north of Chicago, but we've got 36 guys from Arizona on our team. So we do recruit all over the country and try to find the right fits.
Now, your conference, like many conferences, postponed football here in the fall, and we were talking before we came on. Hopefully you guys are able to start in March. And I know you mentioned you're on the committee, but what's the latest as far as making sure that you guys get a chance to have a season?
So the most important thing for the Division III schools is going to be accessibility to testing. Do they have access to testing that they're comfortable with? Our conference has laid out a model that if you don't follow these testing protocols, you're not going to be allowed to play any conference competitions. And so with the new saliva test that's come out by Abbott Laboratories, and still having access to the PCR testing, I think we're in a good place. The saliva test, their reliability rate is okay right now, but I think they're refining that a little bit. And we're pretty fortunate. We have a partnership with Abbott because they're in Lake Forest. And so the company that's making the saliva test is about 6 minutes from our front doors of our campus. And so we're going to have access to those. And we then have a partnership with Rosalind Franklin Medical School, who's doing all of our PCR testing. So if your school can get the testing, I think they're going to be able to find a way to play, whether it's a full season or an abbreviated season. I think that's the big questions right now.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Division I, the big schools now. The Big Ten came back, the SEC. You're starting to see some games get canceled, and a lot of it's always about the money, right? Those big Power Fives. I mean, they can test. They have the money. They have the facilities there. Is that too what a lot of it comes down to some of these schools that can't participate is financially?
Yeah, some of it's either the finances or just their geographic location. I mean, when you think of where some of the small D3 schools are, they're out in the middle of not in major metropolitan areas. And all those Division I schools have their own med schools, for the most part on their campuses. Whereas if you're, let's use, St. Lawrence up in Canton, where are they going to go get their testing done? Do they have a local hospital? Do they have enough testing to satisfy the local community as well as what the athletic programs are asking for? I know that, RPI is doing weekly testing for their entire campus. So, I mean, if you can get access to the testing, I think that you're going to be okay. If you can't get access to the testing with a fast turnaround, I think that's where the bigger issue is.
So I want to go back to the college piece here for a minute with you. We talked a little bit about some of the high school coaches, but talk to me a little bit about some of the college coaches that, you've looked up to that have helped you out, in your journey to where you are today.
Yeah. So, I mean, the two biggest ones, I guess I'll give you three big ones. Adam Gonzaga, who was my defensive coordinator at Greenville when I played, he's the guy that helped me get my first job. And really, he helped me get my first two jobs. He was the guy that was willing to put his name on me as a college football player to go be a GA with no coaching experience and get to coach a position that I didn't even play. I was coaching D-line instead of coaching linebackers. And he helped me get that first job. Still to this day, I see him 4 times a year. We get together, our families. And so he continues that mentorship. And then Paul Schaffner, who's now the defensive coordinator at Colgate. Paul was the head coach at Glenville when I got there. was later the head coach at Buff State and is now the DC over at Colgate, having tremendous success there.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a guy that, even this summer when I came through New York, went out to see him and spend time with him. And always a guy that I can call. He's a guy that really helped me learn how to do the business of coaching, how to recruit, how to, make your own stamp on things and not have to just copy and regurgitate what you've heard somebody say at a clinic. He really helped me dive a lot deeper into coaching. And then Joe Reich, and I'm going to combine him with Rashawn Jordan, who are the head coach and the defensive coordinator at Wingate. Joe taught me how to be calm, like as a coach. And I hate to say that, but I literally think when I started coaching for 4 years straight, all I did was yell. And I thought that yelling was coaching and that yelling would give me credibility amongst the young players because it would show my passion and all that kind of stuff. And Joe was the guy who really helped me find my calm voice as a coach, where I could talk to guys and just spend time with them that way. There have been a number of Division I coaches and Division II coaches who, through relationships, have helped me learn things and move up in the profession and solidify who I am and be a resource for me. But those guys are the ones who, on a daily basis, took the time to mentor and influence at different points in my life to make sure I was getting better.
What are some of the big challenges at Division III schools? I mean, you got the players that, everybody wants to play at the Ohio States, and I was going to say the Michigans, but right now I wouldn't want to play there. But the Penn States, the big schools, you might not get the opportunity at Division I, the 1AA, or even the 2. There's a lot of good Division III football conferences across the country. But what are some of the challenges that you're up against?
Tuition. They have to pay to go to school instead of getting paid to go to school. And that's one of the D1 full scholarship mentality is one that, to be honest with you, I wish would disappear, because you either love playing the sport or you don't. And I really believe that anybody who wants to play college football can find a place to be on the team. That may not mean that they're going to be the starter. It may not mean that, but there are programs through the junior college and post-grad level and D2 and D3 where you can find a home and find a role. But if all you want is to run out there and see 10,000 or 100,000 people in the stands, then you don't actually love football. You love being at the game, and why don't you just go be a fan and tailgate and do it that way? So I think that's one of the challenges. They do have to pay a little bit to go to school. The second thing is that, for a lot of the guys who play in the Division III level, football is not the end all. Football is really an opportunity to help them find their next career, where they're going to go with life. And they may not have known about a small private school, or they've used it to get into a better school than what they could have based on their transcript. And then they play and they just love the game of football. So they've used the sport of football to be their springboard to something else. We got some pretty talented players. I've got a defensive tackle. We're a Division III school, but my backup nose guard was an Air Force Academy commitment. He literally had signed his papers to go to the Air Force Academy, and then something happened and he couldn't go, and so he's here with us. Our All-American freshman was offered by 17 scholarship level schools, and he chose Lake Forest because it was the best fit for him, and he was an All-American as a true freshman. So we're going to find some of that talented players that come to us just because we've made connections with either the player, the coach, or the family, and they come here. So I love it. It helps us a lot.
Now, one of the things I saw too, and I know you've done a lot over the years there, but involving the players in the community. Talk to us a little bit about some of the involvement with your team.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of things that as a team we do every year. Relay for Life is huge on our campus. It is not like anything at any other college campus in the country from what I've been able to see. Almost our entire campus, we'll have over 1,000 people attend our Relay for Life, and we're a 1,500 student campus. But our team has raised about $10,000 each of the last 8-9 years to fight cancer that way. About 12 years ago, we started a thing called Heroes Day, where we celebrate the military and the police and fire on our campus. And our campus is about 6 miles away from Great Lakes Naval Station. So a lot of people go to get their OS training. And we started doing care package collections that we then send overseas to troops that are stationed abroad. And it's really incredible. We've probably sent over 300, 350 care packages at this point, where we stack it full of all the stuff that they want, whether it's, beef jerky or drink mix stuff. We get requests for flavored toothpaste because the military only does like a baking soda baseline, toothpaste. So sending all that stuff over to them to maybe put a smile on their face, and they send us a picture, or join us by Skype or something like that afterwards, thank us, is he lets us have the game be a part of something much bigger than just being at our place.
And Kat, I want to go back high school with Coach DeCola was actually kind enough to be a sponsor tonight for the show. And, Coach is doing a good job. He's putting the time in like all the coaches do. And I think us coaches never get enough credit for what it's a full-time job, high school and college. But what's some of the advice? Have you talked to him? Have you given him any advice, through the ups and downs for him?
I've given him encouragement, maybe not advice. I did actually went out to one of their, I guess it was their summer practice. They were like a summer workout, I guess 2 years ago. I was in Rome and was driving past the stadium, and I saw kids out there, and I went out there with the coach. I actually got a nasty turf burn from that old turf that they had because I was trying to help a kid with a drill, and we got our feet tangled. So I felt the old burn. I was like, I don't miss that burn. But no, I mean, he's got a tough job, man. It's not easy. And I think that at the lower levels, getting those feeder programs back in, I still to this day think that's what helped Rome become successful. Like we talked earlier, 42 rip was always 42 rip, 31 dive was 31 dive, and so on and so forth. And I'd be willing to bet you that if we brought in, 10 guys who haven't been at RFA in 20 years, that we could line up and run most of those plays still. Yeah. And I think that simplicity and having it ingrained for a long time is really, really special. I mean, it's a culture thing for your team. And that was, Coach Campese used to be at Henniger. I remember before my senior year playing those guys in the Dome, he literally was quoting the papers that if the guys wearing the jerseys were at any other school, they'd be 5-5. But because they're at RFA, they've learned how to win since the day they put on a helmet. And that's why they're in this game.
And I still hate him to death. I still hate Henniger. I still hear the name. And I'll never forget, on a side note, I think, you had to be on a basketball team. Do you remember when we went down to Henniger? I tell this story all the time. We were beating them at halftime.
I know.
And then we came out and we ended up losing by like 40 or 50. But we were beating them at halftime, and I think they were ranked in the top 5 in the state.
They were. They were really, really good. They had Dave Davis, who played football at Stanford.
Yep.
They had Marquise. They had Damian, I think it was Damian Brown or Damian Mallory. Damian Mallory, who's went to Rutgers. And then they had a basketball guy, Maurice. I wish I could remember names.
Yeah, and then they had the kid that was a quarterback that played at Bucknell, and I actually kept in touch with him at Fordham. Gerald Funderburg.
Yep.
Was the quarterback. But, man, they were nasty in hoops. We had no business being on a court with them.
No, we should have joined like the TVL or something for a couple of years instead of being in the OHSL. That's at least in basketball.
You know what, though, when we look back at that now, that's been an interesting take here with a lot of fans, parents that'll say, well, if RFA basketball, and Coach Medicis and I talk about this all the time, and I give him shit for this all the time. A lot of teams say, well, RFA started winning when they went into the Tri-Valley League in basketball. They didn't have to play the Syracuse schools. And Nick's done a really good job because he'll go play those Syracuse schools in the non-conference, which is awesome. But when you look at the football piece, do you think teams just caught up to us? I know the base left, we lost some kids, but I always say this, and I argue this. Our best players were homegrown Rome kids. We had the base kids, don't get me wrong. We had the Wayne C's and the Tony Berries that were really good players. But for the most part, man, we were Rome kids, right?
Yep. I think you just hit the nail on the head, though. Rome was generationally a returning – our parents, our two dads, were back in Rome. They grew up in Rome. They had their careers in that area. Look at our generation. The guys who would have came back, our group of guys that have kids, how many of us are back in Rome? I mean, you look at Facebook, and there's guys in Charlotte. There's guys in Chicago. There's guys in Syracuse. The generation of guys, to our parents' credit and to our coaches' credit, our parents and coaches pushed us to go to college, where many of them didn't get a chance to do that.
Right.
And so they pushed us to go to college. We didn't all come back to Rome. And had everybody come back to Rome, you would have that next generation of those Rome kids that it was ingrained in them to be RFA Black Knights. I mean, but those kids aren't back. So now you're having to start with a fresh, canvas of players who don't have parents who believe. I mean, if you've ever seen, what is it, Friday Night Lights, the movie, not the TV show, where like fourth generation playing in that program. Well, I was a third generation RFA grad. My grandfather, much like yours, played football at RFA.
Yep. Yep.
Our dad went to school there and played sports. So we were kind of ingrained into that and grew up with that. And now, what is that age demographic? What is the population of those kids that have a tradition to roam that is it means something to be from there? And I think probably the other part that contributes, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm speculating on this one. Having the field and the high school not connected, not having them at the same location, to me seems like a pretty big negative. I mean, I would hate for RFA Stadium to ever go away, but there is a convenience factor. Now it's really hard for some of those kids to get to stuff in the summer, whereas at the high school is a little bit easier. And I don't know what the school's doing. Are they doing the 0 block hour for the kids so they can all lift as a football team? Are they getting I go out to Arizona, and most of those schools that are now in the top 25 in the country, like they have 2.5 hours of football class a day. They have a weightlifting PE class and then a football class that leads into their practice, where they're actually getting more time with their kids than I get with my college kids.
Wow.
And are the school districts out there willing to do that? Are they doing, my wife's high school, they get, 25 contact days for football with pads on in the summer to get their guys ready for the season. And so I think part of it is the geographic area being in New York State. There's more restrictions than there is nationally, but the schools around you, how are they beating that? And where is the population coming from of the kids that help do that? So,
what I think's hurt too? I don't know if you've seen it this way, nice indoor sports complex called Accelerate Sports. It's a beautiful indoor place facility. You can do basketball all year. My son's up there doing football drills, but it almost seems like when we played, I was football, basketball, and baseball. Mm-hmm. In the summer times, I was at, go into RFA in the morning, get a workout in, get a lift in with Coach Mize, go do what I had to do. But now with these indoor places, if I want to play basketball, I can play basketball all year round. I can play baseball all year round. In a way, I almost think that these indoor places are hurting the 3-sport athletes. You think?
I agreed. I think the 3-sport athlete is I hate to say it's a thing of the past, but it's a rarity now in a big, big way. And it really forces kids to make decisions early because parents think that the scholarship's only going to come if they play that sport alone. But their ceiling when they get to college, what coaches are realizing is the kids who only play one sport have no ceiling of improvement when they get there because they're already at their max ability.
Right.
Whereas the kid who plays 3 sports, once we get him to focus just on football in college, he's going to get that much better while he's here. And, especially the track teams. I mean, heck, how many of us ran track even though we weren't track athletes? I mean, I was out there with Coach Mize running track, and I had no business being on a track team. Coach Billy Mays was out there yelling at me, and Coach Mize was yelling at me, but I got faster, and it helped me in football and it helped me in basketball. So, the AAU programs and the travel club teams and all that, everybody has to remember it costs money to do that. And so, if you're paying money instead of being with your high school team, there is going to be less connection when you get out there on your high school team.
And, even the stadium wise, I think we were the first turf stadium, in the area when we played. And, we just put a new turf field down here. It's beautiful, by the way. It's top notch. But back then we were the stadium. Everybody circled to play Rome because they wanted to come down, play under the lights, play in front of a lot of people. Now when you look at all the high schools in the area, everybody's got turf. Those Syracuse schools, the CNSs, they're still the same teams they were years ago. A lot of them, Baldwinsville, Coach Filippo there, he's still running the same offense he did 20 years ago. But a lot of these schools now, they all got the facilities that we had.
Yeah, and you just got to use the facilities, though. You got to have, the weight room. We had a weight room before anybody else had a weight room. And being back in there, a couple of years ago, our weight room at RFA now it's okay. It used to be the class of the area. Now it's okay. They've got a couple racks, but they don't have these dominant weight rooms. And the weight room not being at the school prevents kids from being able to use it. And so you got to have it where they can access it and use it as part of their PE curriculum and things like that. So they're getting better during the year. So, but yeah, the facilities. The Arcaro Classic was always at Rome. Yeah. I don't know if it still is, but it was always at Rome. And I remember, I played in that game, and you'd have the guys from like West Canada Valley and all these other places that would walk into that stadium in awe that was a high school stadium. And well, now it hasn't changed really in 20 plus years, except for the new turf now. And what does it need to get to feel that way to make it special?
We my senior year was the year that we got beat in the dome to Henniger, and so we got a chance to play in the Carroll Classic, but unfortunately because of the weather, we got a ton of snow. They canceled it, so we practiced a couple nights, and I'll never forget this. I mean, we had probably 10 RFA guys, and you knew how loud Tony Berry was and those guys. And I'll never forget, we get in a huddle on offense, and I don't even remember who the coach was at the time. He put all of us RFA guys on the first team, offense, and Tony Berry looked at the coach and says, "Coach, we know what plays we're running. You don't need to tell us the plays. We know what we're running." Every kid looked up to us like we were college kids. They're like, "Holy shit, Rome kids are playing in this. They're never playing in this game." But we were like college kids.
Yep. We were calling the defense my year. I mean, we didn't run. I don't know what defense we were supposed to be running, but that's not what was getting, once the signal came in, that's not what we ran. So I remember the guys from Camden and us were kind of changing and the Rome Catholic kids were all changing the plays to get us some more productivity. So there's no doubt we were raised to be a higher level football player, and that whether it was in the home or at the stadium with the coaches, we were just treated differently and more was expected of us. I mean, we watched film. I mean, I remember going there and watching film on the old sheet the coach would drop down onto the wall, and other teams weren't watching film. Other teams weren't watching film, and that blew my mind when I went to college. And 25 of the guys I played with on defense my freshman year hadn't watched film in high school, and it blew my mind.
I was petrified on Saturday mornings to watch film when all the linemen sat by Coach Mize, and if there was a lineman that didn't sit by him, he'd let you hear all about it. Have you? You keep in touch? Have you talked to Coach Hoke or Coach Mize or anybody?
I occasionally hear either from them or through them, or I'll hear through Coach Mize's son. I'll talk to those guys a little bit, and but haven't seen much. It's unfortunate I don't get to Rome very often, and when I do, I've got grandparents there still, so I spend time with them, and if I'm there for 2 to 3 days, it's not going to be. Unfortunately, I don't get out very much. Grandma's going to make sure I get fed pretty well. So
Kat, the last thing I wanted to ask you for young coaches that are out there looking to get into the coaching field, what advice would you give them?
First is you never know who you're meeting. And that guy that you're meeting that might be a GA somewhere 3 years from now might be the head coach at Oklahoma. And I mean, there are guys that when you meet them, take a genuine interest in the relationship. Don't just look at the relationship of how they can help you. The second one is listen more than you talk. Especially early on, you may have all these great ideas, but there is definitely a reason why everything in that current program is being done the way it is, and understand that some things can be changed and other things can't, and focus on the ones you can influence. And then just be real, be your true self. Don't change. And I guess probably I was going to stop at 3, but I got a fourth one that just popped into my head. Understand all the people in the program that make it tick that have nothing to do with coaching football. I mean, you think about Kelly Hoke over there, and I mean, forget all the health that she created for us. She was the mind right check. I mean, you went to her, you got your eye black and your shoulder pads snapped, and then you were ready to go play. And there's people like Kelly and Coach Nemai that did all the equipment and all the different people. I mean, Art, who used to run the chain gang, and I mean, all those people did the different things to make the program go. And if any one of those people would have been out of the circle, what would that have done to the coaches? And so if you're a young coach, appreciate the things that everybody around the program is doing to make it better and to make it run, even if you don't see it as that person doesn't make us win a game. Well, you know what? That person took 2 hours of the head coach's time off his plate by handling the equipment or handling the water and the Gatorade, so he didn't have to do it. And I think just learning to appreciate that is something I learned it pretty early on, when you saw how RFA went.
All right, I got to ask this for Coach Medicis. We talk and argue every Saturday morning about Syracuse football. Does Coach Babers get a pass this year because of COVID, or is he done at the end of the year?
I would never wish anything bad on a coach's career at the college level in my world, but I'm hoping he may get a pass because they did have a number of good players opt out, and I think that if you look at the players that they had that opted out for COVID, they would have made a difference. But I do think that there are some things that I think they would even tell you they need to fix. And once they fix some of those things, maybe they can get back to being a little bit more competitive.
How about my guy Jim Harbaugh? Is he out at Michigan? Back to the NFL?
I think there will be a mutual separation of some kind.
I agree.
Now, I think going to the NFL, I mean, I can think of a couple of NFL teams that might be interested in him, but you better have the right quarterback and you better have the right GM to go with him. He has not earned the right to go be the head coach and GM, which is something I think he would want. And as a long-suffering Jets fan, he would have handled timeouts and some situational football better, but I don't know that I want him making decisions on personnel. So I think that you got to be careful what you wish for.
He's the fourth winningest coach in NFL history, winning percentage-wise. If I'm the New York Jets, or if I'm even this one, the Detroit Lions, I'm going after Jim Harbaugh. I wouldn't let him run the team as a GM, but I think he's an NFL guy. I think he belongs there. I'm a huge Jim guy. I thought when Michigan hired him, he checked off every bullet point. Michigan man, played for Bo Schembechler, had success at Stanford. He was a winner everywhere he's been. I just can't believe this thing's went south so bad. He can't beat the big boys. And my wife's a Buckeye fan.
Well, that's a different issue, but I think you also have to take into perspective how elite Ohio State football is right now. And that is a component that I know as a Michigan fan you don't want to have to own. But Ohio State hasn't been bad in a very long time. I mean, even you take the Jim Tressler years, rolling right into Urban Meyer, rolling right into Ryan Day. Like, forget who the head coach are. They have been phenomenal football team for a very long time, and they run their program in such a way that it's not the way that it was run in the 80s, when Bo Schembechler was there. It's run very differently to make sure that they are at the cutting edge. It's like we were talking about our coaches at RFA. They were always ahead of the curve. Michigan has tried to stay Michigan without changing, and now they're a very good 8-4, 9-3 football team, but they're not going to beat those elite teams that you're talking about. They're if they don't change some of the things that they do, develop quarterbacks from within instead of getting transfers, and they might have to open up the offense a little bit. They might need to see some things change that way to get there.
How about this one? And I got to let you go. Dino Babers leave. Herb Hand, the local guy, comes back as the head coach. And then for Michigan, I think they go Luke Fickell, the former Buckeye, comes in as the head coach.
They're going to have to throw a boatload of money at Luke Fickell for him to go to Michigan. And I know they can do it. Yep. As for Coach Hand, I love Herb. And every coach wants to be a head coach at some point, but I'm not sure I'm leaving Texas as in his role there to go to Syracuse unless there is an inside track that he knows about that's going to make them successful.
I agree.
One of the hard parts for Syracuse is you got to have a place to recruit, and your backyard's not going to produce enough Division I talent that you have to go convince kids to come up to the snow. And that was one of the things that Coach Pasqualoni always did well. He was able to take those New Jersey kids. He was able to get the Philly kids. He was able to get the Florida kids. And then he would come out to the Midwest, and he would find, the Donovan McNabbs, and he would find some other guys. He kind of owned that Northeast corridor, Maryland up. And the next coach that comes in, where are they going to find their niche market? And I don't know where that is for Syracuse. You got to find your own market, but they've got to find a place to go and get that high-end top talent player.
Well, Cat, man, I appreciate you coming on tonight. I love you, man. I've been following you. I'll continue to follow you. You've always been good to me. So I appreciate tonight. It means a lot to have you on here tonight.
Appreciate it, brother. Thanks for having me on. And for all those Black Knight coaches out there, good luck. And when COVID kind of lifts, go get some wins because, all the fans out here, I'm definitely one of those fans. I love watching, checking the scores. And I know there's sometimes really tough years. And when I see Coach Medicis, dropping 100-point games in basketball, I'm like, we never had a chance to do that. But we weren't even going to get the green light. So I love checking in on that and following. So I appreciate what you're doing, man. Good luck with the next batch of shows with the Rock Pile.
All right, buddy. Take care. Have a good holiday. Keep in touch.
Will do. Bye.
That's awesome, man. Cat, like I said, he took me under his wing when I got called up as a ninth grader on varsity. He stood by me the whole time, and he's had a fantastic career. And I know he's only going to continue to do good things, and great to catch up with him. I am so excited. I'm going to do a tribute here. I wrote it by hand. I'm going to read it to you on Alex Trebek, but I'm so excited for next Wednesday night. I'm going to talk to Spiro Ditas, who broadcasts for the CBS network. He's called Super Bowls. He's called Final Fours. He's on NFL Network. He calls a lot of NFL games. He's a Fordham alum. I'm excited to talk to him next Wednesday night. So make sure to follow me across all social media platforms. Hit the subscribe button to follow me on YouTube. Special thanks tonight to Coach Catanzaro for coming on here tonight on the Rock Pile. We lost Alex Trebek passed away this week, and I want to read you this so I don't leave anything out. I'd like to pay tribute to the late Alex Trebek. I want to thank him for coming into many living rooms all over the world, but I want to especially thank him for coming into both of my grandparents' houses growing up. He brought smiles, laughter, competition, but most of all, he brought families together. Growing up, we always watched Pat Sajak with Wheel of Fortune and, of course, Jeopardy. And I always wanted to be the next game show host. And I remember all the game shows that we used to watch. And as a kid, when you were sick, staying home at my grandma's salon with my mom working in the back room, I was watching Bob Barker and The Price is Right. You name it. I always wanted to be a game show host. As we say goodbye to Alex Trebek, the show must go on. And in one of his last interviews, he told the producers to give him 30 seconds. And think about that, 30 seconds to fit 36 years of a game show is incredible. And I want to read this quote. He said, "Don't ask me who's going to replace me because I have no say whatsoever. But I'm sure if you give them the same love and respect that you've shown me, they will be a success. And the show will continue to be a success." And one of his final words, he said, "Until we meet again, God bless you and goodbye." So for me, I want to say thank you to Alex Trebek. Give my love to my Aunt Teresa, my Grandma Sue, my Nana Minnie, my Grandpa Louie, my Grandpa Jerry, and thanks for bringing Jeopardy in my own personal family. And I'll leave you with 3 words, and it's 3 words for Jeopardy. And I'll see you guys next Wednesday night. Thanks for tuning in. This is Jeopardy. Have a good night, everybody.